So today we're going to talk about playback mode. Playback mode is probably the most complex feature just as far as the messaging and the user interface, and there's a lot of things going on. So uh, I may have to break it up into two parts. I'm not really sure the best way to do this. A lot of things have changed over the last few years, a lot of features added, a lot of fixes have been done. So I think what I'll do is I think the best way to do this, just kind of run through some of the menu items first. It may confuse you a little bit, but at least you'll see everything. I don't want to dive into too much detail. And then maybe later I can do specific videos on running a playback a certain way or recording a defense or storing a defense or, you know, stuff like that. So this one is primarily for just walking through some of the things, maybe showing you a couple of things, not diving into too much detail. So what I suggest you do is pause the video, get yourself a cup of coffee, relax. I'm gonna get your brain working a little bit. So sorry about that, but let's see if we can get through this. Right? I'm gonna get you running playback successfully. Okay. All right. Here we go. So right now I have the rods connected, or the devices connected to the goalie rod and the two rod, and they're paired. Now, obviously, the devices, you can run zones and all kinds of stuff with playback. So you could run it on the three rod and the five rod and all that stuff. But let's keep it simple right now. So they're connected. I'm going to go in here and hit configure. And I'm already in playback mode, but normally you would just go and hit playback mode. It'll put both rods into playback mode. And then you're going to have two main windows here. Okay. Now I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I will tell you this. The options window is where all the defenses are that were created from videos. Okay. Videos are created using a software called FoosTrack. FoosTrack actually tracks real live videos of matches and it breaks them down. If you look here, it's tracking the play figures on the left and the ball on the right, and it merges that data and it creates FoosFit data. That FoosFit data is subdivided into different sets like goalie rod, five rod, we call it all rods. And then that data is imported into the database on the FoosFit, and then that allows you to pull it. And that's what's happening here. You're allowed to pull those defenses and play them. So without confusing you, just real quick, if you wanted to see, say, um, Tony and Brandon playing Lewis Fitch and Trevor Park, you could click here. You see all these defenses. Well, we're goalie, right? So you can filter out certain things, but I'm not going to do all that right now. You could literally select one of these, like Texas State here, and it's saying Brandon Moreland is blocking probably Lewis Fitch or Trevor Park, right? So I can say load attempts, and I can come to the playback control window here, and there are. There's three attempts there, right? So that's just one example. You could pull a different one, totally different one, Terry Moore and Robert Mares. Okay, goalie defense. Let's see, that's Terry Rue blocking, load it, and then boom, there's a few more. There's five defenses, right? So that's how you pull them, and it drops them into this little window here. And then from there, you would actually load it to your device. Like you would say, just click on it and it'll load it. Okay. So it's actually loading it right now. I don't want to get into all the nuances of loading defenses right now, but just say that for simplicity, it loads it. Okay. Um, Now there's this manual input window. The manual input window is used whenever you record a defense, whether using the animation or the actual record on the devices like this, where you hit this guy and then you have the animation here. Um, Anything you record gets dropped here, that defense. Okay. The reason it's dropped there is that's why it's called manual input, because that is the place where you can store defenses, you can manipulate defenses, you can manipulate them and then reload them back to the device. So that's just kind of the work area for manipulating defenses. Um, and just so you know, these little buttons here are called radio buttons. All right. Whenever I say radio, that's what I'm talking about. Uh, Whenever you want to do anything, like even though it's showing that number one is clicked, that just means that most likely you loaded no number one to the device. Okay. Just because something's sitting here doesn't mean it's on the device yet. So like if I want to load number three, I click it and it says, now what it's doing here is I won't talk about that yet. It's actually converting the defense because I'm currently set to Bonzini. But if I set it to tornado, you won't see that message. And we'll talk about that in a second. Um, so whenever you want to load a defense, just click the one you want to load. Okay. Here's where you play things. You can, if you hit this, it's like going back, it's load number two. This is a stop. This is play. That's forward. So you can, if you hit forward, it's going to load the next defense. This is, uh, let me let that finish. Sometimes it'll get stuck, and that's, come on. Could have got stuck. A 6 second defense. Yeah, see, it said resending because it was having trouble. Okay. This is the repeat. As you can see, it has a white ring around it. That means it's on repeat. That's kind of the default. If you click it again, it'll turn it off. Um, that just means it'll play a defense. And when it gets to the end of the defense, it'll tell the app, hey, I'm done. And then it'll say, what do you want to do next? And if this is clicked, it'll say, okay, repeat. And the app will tell it, okay, play it again. So it'll just say set, play it, set, play it. Um, if you don't want it to do that and you want it to just go to the next defense, you turn it off. It'll play number three. When it's finished, it'll go to number four, number five, back to number one. If you hit shuffle, it'll randomly select them, so you don't know which one's coming next. Um, and then this is the record button. If you hit record, it'll say set. Then you can literally go to the devices and you can move them in however you want, shuffle, reverse, whatever. And when you're finished, you hit stop, and then you can immediately play it. You just hit play. Now, remember I talked about the manual input window? Let's say you recorded something, you're like, man, that's amazing. I want to keep it. Okay. If you hit download right here, like I'll clear these. This is just some defenses in there. If you hit download, whatever is currently in the device, whether it's something you recorded or whether it's something you were previously playing, see that? It just dropped it right there when I hit that download button. So it dropped that defense right there. Now you can manipulate it. Okay. You can save it in a database. You could adjust it a little bit. Now, most people are not going to sit here and write a defense, right? That's not realistic. But there are other little features, like we have an invert feature here, where it inverts the defense. If it's a standard, it'll invert it to reverse, right? So, uh, but so that's what's happening here. The delay is 1 second delay right now. That means every time it finishes the defense, it's going to say 1 second wait, then it'll say set and start again. I think you can set it to like 5 second delay. Now, if you set it to zero, that means something a little bit different. When the app first starts the very first defense, if it sees that your delay is set to zero, it's basically telling the device, hey, when you get to the end of this defense, whether it's 6 seconds or whatever, don't stop. Just loop back around right to the beginning of defense and keep going. Don't even tell me you're done, and just keep looping forever, right? And when I want you to stop, I'll hit stop here and it'll stop, right? So that'll just, so maybe you created a certain little shuffle and you just want it to keep going, right? It'll just keep going. By default, we set it to one. So it gets to the end, so set, and it starts over again. Okay. A couple other things here. I'm going to start at the top here now. Whenever you first go to playback, you have to do what's called a run playback test. Um, because if the rods don't center properly, then that means something's wrong and it's not going to play right. So you hit the test, see what happens. Um, an example is if you look at the two rod here, if you look at two rod, see it's kind of centered. The rod itself is centered, right? Because the two men on the rod are right, kind of right in the center. The rod is equal distance from each side of the device and the table. And then if you look at the goal, he's not perfectly centered, but he's pretty close, right? If it lands like anywhere in that general area, then you're probably good, okay? If not, you can run the test again and just see what happens. Now, if it shoots over to the side and is like humming, or just both rods just won't come off the side, that's telling you that there's a problem, right? In that case, you'll probably need to go just hit the playback again. What that does, it resends the playback message to the device saying, hey, you need to be in playback mode. I don't know where you're at now, but get yourself in playback mode. And then hit calibrate. Okay. And you see how they move? And then go back here and you can run your playback test again. Okay. And I'm just going to run it, see what happens real quick. See, it says if rods don't center, there you go. You see that? So how they landed like that? That means everything's good to go. Most likely, if you run, you won't have any issues. Now, there's two other things here: auto convert and protect wall. Auto convert is when you set up your FoosFit for the first time and you come to this little gear here. You see the little gear, and I clicked it and it popped up user settings. You must have a table type set for playback to work correctly. Right now, I'm set to tornado because that's my default table. If you're a Bonzini player, you'd click Bonzini and then you would say set as default. That means that every time a defense is played, it's going to convert it to Bonzini. Okay. Now, I don't want to get into a lot of detail, but there was no way. I thought I was going to do this at the very first, but I realized later that it's just impossible. It's impossible for me to create defenses for every single table, right? So what we decided was we would create everything as tornado defenses, right? Videos that come from tornado. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do Bonzini or Leonhardt or whatever, but we create everything as a tornado defense, okay? And then if you are set to a different table type, the software will use a conversion algorithm based on your table type, because we have all the measurements of your tables, and we tried our best to convert the defense to fit or align within your table. So that way, if it's blocking a certain range, it'll try to shorten it or widen it a little bit to fit your table. So when you have auto convert on, it always assumes that the defense that's sitting here, whether it's here or here, is a tornado defense. Whether it is or not, doesn't matter. It assumes it is. And it will try to convert that defense. So because I changed it, I'll give you an example to Bunzini. If you notice, when I hit this button right here, it says converted goalie data from Tornado to Bunzini. See that? So it converted it and then it loaded it to the device. Now, if you were to download that defense back from the device, it's going to do the same thing, but now it's going to convert it back to Tornado. See, watch. Converted defense from Bunzini to Tornado. See that? Because it always is trying to get back to Tornado. Now, if you turn the auto convert off, it's not going to do anything. It's going to say, I don't know who you are. I don't care. If you're a Bonzini player and you want to create a defense, I'm not going to convert it. I'm not going to do anything, right? So you can store, there's really no benefit or not to doing it. Personally, I would just leave this on. Whether it's converting or not makes no difference to you. There are some nuances that you can do. If you're trying to convert from Bonzini to Leonhardt, well, then you would have to do some manipulation, right? But for all intensive purposes, that's just kind of what's happening, okay? Protect wall, I generally just leave it on. All it's doing is when the devices are slinging back and forth, when they get really close to the wall, sometimes they'll bang hard depending on the defense. The protect wall feature, it simply tries to adjust the defenses whenever they're close to the wall, not to hit so hard, right? So it just kind of protects the devices and maybe your table a little bit. But so generally, I just leave it on. You won't see much effect, uh, but just so you know. Now, all defenses are by default recorded at 18 frames per second. Why do we pick 18? That was the best on memory usage and performance, right? That was kind of the happy medium. But it's not to say you can't record or play a defense at a faster speed. So, like, you can record a defense at 30 or 18, right? And if you record it at 18, then you better play it at 18 or it's not going to give the same result, right? But the idea is, personally, I wouldn't record at 60 because it sucks up so much memory. It just creates these huge, large defenses, and the performance is not that much difference between them to really need it. But if you're looking for something a little bit like maybe, it's just like a video recorder, right? Just a better resolution. You can record or play at like 30 and, but if you're having no issues with 18, I'm just telling you now, all of our videos that we store in the system are done at 18. Because if we did them at 30 or 60, they would just expand, the memory so fast. But so another thing we have here is animation. Okay. Animation, you you can record defenses by hand, right? By literally moving the devices. And that was the very first way we did it when we designed the playback feature. But later, when we were doing the conversion for the different table types, we realized there was a little side effect. We needed a tool because I didn't have all the tables, right? I didn't have Bunzini and Leonhardt all of readily available. So I needed a way to be able to test them. So we created this animation. And as a side effect, we realized, wait a minute, we can do other things with it, right? So I'm going to show you real quick. If I pull up the animation, remember I set the table type to Bunzini. And that's why when you pull up the animation, it's showing you Bunzini. Because what it's doing is it's showing you the mapping. When the rod is dead center, it's 127 and 127. You see that? Goalie rod? Look at the goalie rod. But as I move it, look what happens. But when tornado's at 184, the Bonzini is only at 177 to get the same relevant movement. You see that? So that's part of the table conversion stuff. But the cool thing is, what we realized was we can actually allow people to preview defenses from the animation and they can record their own defenses. So you can actually, anything, remember, we're back to this manual input window. Everything happens from the manual input. So whatever is in the manual input is what the animation is going to play. Okay. So if I was to load, say, defense 2, okay, to the device. So I loaded 2, right? I'm just going to download it now and I'm pulling it into the manual input. There it is. See that? So that defense now, that's number 2 defense loaded to the device and then pulled back to the manual input. If I click it, now normally when you're playing with animation, you may not actually be connected. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold here. You may not be connected to a device, which is fine, but because we are, it's actually loading it. But anyway, to stay on point here, so I just loaded it. If I show animation, I can actually play it. So it's actually playing that defense. See that? Now, it was really short. What was it? I don't even know. I think it was like 2 seconds or whatever it was, right? But the idea is whatever is in the manual input, if you click on it, that's the one that's going to play here. So you can actually play it, right? You can play it and you can pause it, play it, right? So another cool feature is you can actually create defenses with your thumbs. Okay. So you can, if you're on like an Android device and I hit record, watch what'll happen. It makes these fatter so they'll fit your thumbs, right? And then you can slide these back and forth. Now you see how it switched the Bonzini table to the top because we're currently set to Bonzini. So it assumes that you're playing on a Bonzini right now. And you see how I'm moving it around there, moving it around, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to hit stop. Okay. Now, if I if I want that defense to play, it dropped it right here. Okay. So let's just see. I'm not sure if I have to click this. Let's see. If I hit play, see, that's the defense. I'm moving just one thumb at a time, right? So that's what I did. And then I think I moved the 2 rod a little bit, right? Come on, there we go. Right. So it's actually mimicking what I actually just did, right? So You can record with your thumbs a real defense, and then you can simply come here, right? And you hit this, and it's going to dump it into the actual devices, right? So now it's dumping it into the devices, right? So it's resending. It had an issue. That's one of the fixes I recently did with the 3.7 release is if it ever has an issue loading a defense, it'll try to do like a retry. Sometimes over Bluetooth, things get lost, messages. If like a byte gets lost, if we can detect it, we try to retransmit. So let me just see. I'm going to hit play here. Okay, let's see what it does. So it's going to move. Remember we did, you see that? I moved it, the back rod, and then I moved the front one. See that? Look at that. So it's actually running and then it'll hit stop. See? And it'll say set. So starts over again. So what, as you can see, I literally was able to animate with my thumbs, hit the radio button here and load it into the device and play it. So I love that feature. I use it all the time. I'll just create me a quick little, shuffle, or I'll like, what I'm gonna work on kind of if they're gonna tap middles today, right? So I'll really open those middles and close them and I'll move them around. I'll do a reverse, whatever. And then I'll put it on there and I'll just sit there and practice shooting that for a little while. And then I'll just create another one, right? So I really like to use the animation feature, but I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. We'll talk a little bit more about it maybe in a separate video. I think I ran through everything, kind of showed you what the manual inputs used for, the basics. These are defenses that are pulled from the options window, right? Here's how you play your different defenses or record. Here's how you download whatever's in the device. So just know things are going from the app to the device to the animation window, right? But they're all kind of going through that manual input. So anytime you hit it, just know, look for what you want, right? If you have something in the device and you want to see it, download it to there, right? To the manual input. If you have something in the animation and you want to play it, just hit that little radio button and then it'll play it, right? You can have different speeds. The auto update, you don't really have to worry about too much. That just means that there's something called metadata. So, which is like, when we click on something like right here, and you see it tells you 4 seconds, Robert Mares, it's telling you the offensive player. That's data that's pulled from the database. And when auto update is set, it grabs that metadata and it updates the frame rates because when you set the frame rate, like the play frame rate, it sends it to the devices because it has to tell the device at what speed to play, right? So all that is happening automatically when you have auto update checked. So pretty much leave it checked. There are just certain reasons you wouldn't do it. Um, like I'll give you an example. If you wanted to record a defense at one frame rate, but then play it at a different, right? Or record it really fast, but then I want to play it slow, right? So something like that. You'd have to turn this off so it doesn't auto send something you don't want to the device, basically. So that, hope I didn't overload you. I just ran through a bunch of things really quick. So if you need to re-see it, you can go watch the video again. I just wanted to give you a walkthrough of several things. I'll probably make like a part 2 and I'll talk about, part 2, just how do you store a defense? How do you record with animation, right? Maybe I'll do it with a real Android phone. Um, just just walk through very specific things that may give, because I noticed kind of questions we get, right? Or what are some of the nuances that you'll see when running playback? I'm gonna have a video just on that, okay? So thanks for your time. Um, just play around with it. If you have any questions at all, send us an email. I try to get back to people as quick as I can. I mean, at worst case, I'll set up a FaceTime with you or whatever, and we'll figure it out. I'm gonna get you running, right? I don't want anybody uh, to be unsuccessful. I want everybody to be happy and working and doing good, right? So I'm looking at my dog's barking now, saying, "Hey, done with this video." Okay, So have a good day. Get your FoosFit out. Start practicing.